For folks who are joining the session, you have joined between a rock and a hard goods place. Gotta love a good play on words. And this lab discussion is all about essentially like climate certification within the ski and snowboard sort of industry, specifically as it relates to building product while protecting the future of the sport. So that's what we're going to be diving into. And my name is Emily Pendergraft. I'm going to be your moderator. I have various experience in sort of the sustainability and certification space, having worked both at 1% for the Planet and sort of in the carbon offset market. So I'm really excited to be with everyone here today. As mentioned, if folks who are joining have questions kind of throughout the session, you're welcome to put those in the chat, and I will hold some time at the end of the session to dive into those and ask as many as we can of our panelists in the time allotted. But we also have a bunch of really great content to dive into. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it along to each of our panelists to do just a brief introduction of sort of who you are, who you work for, and what perspective you intend to kind of bring to today's discussion. So I'm going to kick it off first with Caitlin.
Well, thanks, Emily. Really excited to be here. I'm Caitlin Drown. I'm the brand engagement manager at Climate Neutral. So Climate Neutral is an independent nonprofit that certifies companies that are carbon neutral. So I work closely with all of our brands to help build a movement beyond just our annual certification process. And I help all of our brands communicate about their certification. So making sure that they're developing storytelling and branding around the certification that is authentic and helps educate their customers and stakeholders on what the label actually represents and all the work that they've gone through.
Awesome, thanks, Caitlin. And how about Bella?
Yeah, I'm also with Climate Neutral, and I manage the certification process. So I take brands through the process of measuring their carbon footprint, offsetting the whole thing, and then committing to reduction measures.
Thank you so much. And I'm Bryan. How about yourself?
Hi, so I'm the Senior Director of Product Design at Burton Snowboards, and basically oversee all categories of new product design.
Thanks for being here. And then Cyrus, we'll go to you.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. My name is Cyrus, and I work with a ski company based in Burlington, Vermont called Renoun. And we're a high-end, high-tech ski company. We sell only B2C, which is one of the few ski brands or summer brands actually that do that still. So it's a fun time.
Sweet. Thanks, Cyrus. And Austin, last but not least.
Hello, I'm Austin, and I'm a pro snowboarder for the last 15 or almost 20 years. And what that means is I'm utilized by brands to sell goods. And then this last year, myself and a pro skier, Eric Pollard, started a new hardgoods company to kind of help question the annual consumer cycle of our hardgoods and kind of just question that model as a guy that's been involved in it a long time.
Great. Well, thank y'all. Oh, go ahead.
I'm here on behalf of Season Equipment, is that brand.
There you go. Perfect. Perfect. And I think this is really cool and because this is all virtual, which I understand is the world that we're living in now, but folks are being, we're all over the place. We have folks in Colorado, Oregon, Vermont, North Carolina. So a lot of representation across the country, which is really exciting. So as this panel is all about production and sustainability, would someone, and I'll let y'all sort of decide who'd like to take this one, give just a quick overview of the process of building a ski or a snowboard so folks just have kind of like a high level understanding of what that actually entails?
Ooh, I can jump in here. Really, it's building a high-tech sandwich. When you think about adding layers and you start from the bottom up, you have a mold that's the basic shape of what your ski or snowboard is going to look like. You lay in the base material, then the metal edges, a layer of fiberglass, a core, depending on what material that is, another layer of fiberglass, and then the top sheet. It's all held together by an epoxy resin squeezed in a press. A lot of resin comes out the sides in a typical situation. It all cures, usually with heat, and then you have the end product, which you have to clean up and trim the edges, sharpen the edges, polish the base, everything else. But that's it, really quick.
Yeah, when people ask me, I always just describe a panini press, right? It's just like you're saying, building a sandwich. You put it in a press, you smash it down, and out comes a pair of skis or a snowboard. So it's definitely more straightforward than I think a lot of folks think at the end of the day. I know for myself, I learned how to build skis from Google, just looking around online and stuff. So it's pretty funny how actually low tech in general, there's some high tech elements to it, but how at its root, how relatively low tech skis and snowboards actually are. It's pretty neat.
Yeah.
And how long from, not counting the design process, but just how long is the process of we have a design and we get it, made roughly?
You mean like just in terms of actual manufacturing, like to build it? Well, we could build a snowboard in about 2 hours, all said and done. It's pretty quick.
Cool, thanks. Okay, so that's, I think, good context for folks as we kind of dive into the discussion. So the winter hardgood industry is pretty small, maybe a few billion worldwide max. As a small buyer of the worldwide production of raw materials, like the resins and the fiberglass and all of those things you just described, Bryan, how much responsibility do you believe companies like Season Equipment, Renoun, Burton, have to push your suppliers in their sourcing and supplying practices?
This is a tough one. I think we have a lot of responsibility to do it, but our market is so small. In terms of pushing innovation, we can take innovation, we can take materials from a lot of other places. But I think what this really comes down to is designing the process versus designing the product. Like there's certain manufacturing techniques that are in place right now. And in terms of a snowboard or a ski, you've got factories that are set up to do it and they want to do it fast. And this is the way it's known, and they can put something out very reliably. In terms of like a snowboard binding, for example, we want to make those strong enough. We have industry standards that we have to pass. So then the material that we use is chosen to make sure that we meet that. We want to make our product light. We want to make it beautiful, but it has to be strong enough. You've got to trust it. So with all of that, then again, there's materials that you pick that do the right job. So we're kind of limited. But if you start looking at how do you change the process rather than the product, then maybe that might open some new doors. That takes a lot of time to get there, though.
And yeah, Bryan, I guess what do you mean by the process of it? Is like the actual the process of manufacturing, or what do you mean? Yeah,
well, so think about what we just described with wet layup, right? If you look at composites, the composite industry, most of them have gone to pre-preg construction, meaning that they're not taking a dry piece of fiberglass and then laying wet epoxy resin on top of it, which creates a lot of waste. They've optimized their resins to make a super strong, super lightweight structure. And I'm using that in a broad word of whatever a structure might be. Think of tennis rackets or fly rods to a Formula One race car. I mean, that could be a lot of different things. But so they've designed their end result, what they're trying to create, as well as how their manufacturing process is going to allow them to get that end result. Did that make sense, Cyrus? I mean, I know you're asking the question, but am I giving you enough information to tell the story? It's pretty open-ended, really. I mean, this is a hard thing to communicate in a few minutes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Emily, you mentioned this hard good space being pretty small, but then you also used the word billions, and I feel like it's always tough to, there's so many people that get caught in that, like, well, we're not big enough to make a change, whether it's at a brand level or at an industry level. but you're still using the word billions, and that's a pretty big number to me. And innovation can come from a small brand. It can come from a small industry, but that can have a ripple effect throughout. So there is no too small to try to make improvements. So don't let that be a hindrance.
No, I appreciate that. Austin, can you maybe speak a little bit more to that? Because, I think in the conversations that I've had in my work with small brands, there's a lot of conversation around sort of collective impact, right? And so maybe you could speak a little bit to your evolution of sort of your company and how you came to kind of do what it is that you do. You mentioned in your intro kind of pushing product and starting to kind of question everything that the industry was kind of having you as a pro athlete represent. But also now that you're kind of on the other side of it, how are you working with companies like Renoun or Burton or other folks that are sort of like-minded to maybe push the conversation forward?
Yeah, I guess so. I previously worked at or snowboarded for a company called Nitro, and my partner Eric Pollard skied for a company Line, and they're both big hardgood companies. And yeah, our roles there were just to sell more new product every year. And it's kind of just a lighter, stronger, faster. It's one of those three things every year is a spin on one of those. And it's hard to change companies that have been in business for 20 years, for 30 years, for 40 years, just because they have their structure, they have their retailers, their distributors. And it's hard to kind of question that whole cycle. So that's why we jumped off and started this new endeavor. And one of the big principles is just questioning that annual consumer cycle. And so that's selling hard goods that are going to look the same every year. And we really encourage people to hold on to them to the end of their life cycle rather than the end of their seasonal cycle. And it's something that you see happening beyond snowboarding, beyond hard goods. It's in every industry. There's a new F-150 every single year, even though there's really not much new about an F-150 every single year. And now you see Tesla questioning that business model, and they only update their cars when there's actual room for innovation and when there's time to update them. And so I think it's not just hard goods, but it's just consumerism in a bigger picture that we just need to question annual. Just because it's December, it doesn't need to have a new graphic or new label if it still works.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. I think just the billions, like you said, it is big, and I know I find myself stuck in this too. Is on the surface, it's big. Then I think about a Tesla that will lose the entire the entire market cap of hard goods in a day, with their market cap with that one single business. So in one token, I feel yes, ski industry we are in the billions in that sense. On the flip side, compared to others, it is tiny. And I know I get caught up in that same thinking of, well, we're just too small to really go after and push our suppliers or push our manufacturing or something like that. But you're right, Austin, in the sense of sure, small if you want to compare it to these other giants in the world, but it doesn't mean we're, like you said, there's no such thing as too small. And I still catch myself thinking that even though we are small, and even Renoun as a very, very, very small company within a small industry, there's still some level of responsibility that we have to still push that, whether it is our manufacturing, whether it's the supplies, whether our shipping practices, or just thinking about the size of our boxes or how we're going to ship a binding and a pair of skis together instead of two separate packages. So yeah, it's a tough balance.
Yeah.
And I think this industry, just given how visible skis and snowboards are, I'm not a pro snowboarder, but I do remember kind of going to the small hill as a middle schooler, and what a real part of someone's identity, their ski or their snowboards was. And given how visible it is, you all do have a voice, and people kind of can catalyze around this idea that these brands are sustainable. And then that creates consumer demand. And that's a big part of climate neutral's theory of change is if we just build consumer demand for climate action, that's when you start seeing supply chains change. Because the people selling you resin and fiberglass and all of that stuff,
they start to understand that consumers are demanding something different. And so using your outsized voice as a pro athlete or a cool brand, like that matters outside of just your supply chain and just the resin that you buy.
I think the idea of an outsized voice or outsized voice, it's so true. The amount of like the cool factor for outdoor sports, skiing, snowboarding is huge if you compare it to our market cap or the size of the industry or what the product actually is. It is really cool to see how excited people get behind this stuff. And I think you're totally right, Isabella, that like capitalizing on that makes sense, and it could be part of marketing strategy or any kind of narrative in climate change or carbon neutral.
So this kind of like leads right into the conversation around marketing. And when I worked at 1% for the Planet, I know that a key element of why a lot of companies initially were sort of considering joining a network or participating in a certification was they were really, concerned, and I think rightfully so, of consumers thinking that they were just greenwashing, right? And certainly from when that organization was started to now, there's been a ton of evolution in sort of the space around sustainability and the conversation therein. But knowing that this is a really legitimate concern for companies and consumers, how are each of you, and I know you work in like a variety of facets, but how are each of you ensuring customers of your legitimacy in your sustainability efforts? And I suppose for the climate neutral folks, how are you supporting all of the companies in which you work with?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. So for climate neutral, all companies that we work with go through the same exact process. Either they fulfill the requirements of our certification or they don't. If they don't, they can't use the label. If they do, they can. So they all have to measure, offset, and reduce their scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions. It's really important for us of the credibility behind what we're doing. We're not just a certification body that slaps a label on things. We're have really strict standards that are in place that are reviewed on an annual basis. So that again makes our certification more trustworthy amongst both of our brands and within the consumer spending group. I always kind of, when I'm looking at sustainability messaging, I look for whether it's specific, transparent, and authentic. Specific meaning that you're not just saying, hey, we're an eco-friendly brand. Like, what does that actually mean? Are you carbon neutral? Are you zero waste? Really kind of diving in a little bit deeper on what you're claiming to do. And then as far as transparency goes, are you publishing the data somewhere? Is it on your website? So if you are carbon neutral, what were your emissions? Are they decreasing or are they increasing as you grow? What are you doing on reduction? So kind of digging a little bit deeper and having that data out so your consumers can really feel comfortable with what you're claiming. And then authenticity is really important. We're seeing more companies become sustainable or eco-friendly because they have to. Like, quite frankly, they don't have any other choice because consumers are demanding it and their competitors are doing it. So really kind of tying the efforts that you're making and the work that you're doing to your brand's mission and values. So for ski and snowboard brands, it's pretty clear that climate change is threatening not only your sport, but the very existence of the places that you like to, spend your time in, on mountains and out in the outdoors. So really tying that work to what you believe in as a company, again, makes you seem more genuine and honest with your consumers and helps you kind of tell that story beyond just saying, hey, we're doing this because we have no other option. Again, of making it clear of why it's important to your company.
And I guess to echo Caitlin, it's those, I think the greenwashing thing was more prevalent before these certifications were out, before these organizations were there, when people were just saying, I think we're trying to be green. And now that you have 1% for the planet, you have climate neutral, you can just have a stamp on it, and it shows that they are putting their best foot forward. And I think that's really helped eliminate kind of that skepticism amongst consumers as well, just like how green are they? And there's a lot more transparency through these organizations like Climate Neutral. So thanks for doing the hard work.
Yeah, Caitlin, I really like what you said about honesty. I think that's really important. We put everything on our website. People can come and find it. I think we do a good job of talking about it, but if people are interested, they can find out all that we do. And we really break that down into our product, people, our playground, and our whole process, and just tell the story that way. I think it lets people really believe that you're into it. You know, you really want to make a difference. And hey, we're not perfect. Nobody's perfect, but we're trying hard, and that's important.
Yeah, totally. And I think jumping off that too, as the way you say that the outsized voice that we have as well, and our responsibility to use that, and it goes to marketing as well. And I know for us, we had a lot of long conversations around, you know, what level of honesty do we have on our website, or what we talk to our customers about the true, you know, impact of every single ski we build. And we settled on just like, let's just like take the entire lid off. It's not going to be a small, like, oh yeah, you know, skis are okay. They're not great for the environment. We're just like, no, they're terrible, like straight up terrible. And we decided to lean like heavy into that side of things, but it was really nerve wracking. And for us, we're a very small brand, and it's really easy for, you know, to get the entire company in a room, have a discussion and change that. And I can't imagine, you know, for larger brands, it's a far more complicated process to work through. Yeah, and I mean, just one step at a time. But I think going back to like the authority, the honesty, but also and using our outsized voices, it can almost be damaging. It can be even more damaging if you're not authentic and honest with that. Where if there is some level of, yeah, whether it's like specifically overtly greenwashing, but also just kind of brushing some stuff under the rug. I think it is cool that, you know, like Bryan, like you're saying, the fact that you have all that stuff, you know, yes, you're maybe not throwing it out there on your front page of Burton.com, but the fact that it's even there is something that I'm sure Burton's been far more progressive with this than most companies, but you know, it's probably something that even 10, 15 years ago wasn't as easily accessible. So it's pretty cool to see that, you know, even a huge company like Burton that has an incredible legacy behind it is that's a, you know, big part of their communication with the outside world.
I appreciate, you know, that everyone's really talking about how there's been a lot of evolution of thinking, and that there is like this desire and need really to communicate to your customer base what it is that you're investing time, energy, and real dollars into, certainly. But I also think it's sort of exciting to see the evolution of, you know, the realization that during things like recessions, what are the first budgets to get cut, right? They're generally marketing dollars. And historically, a lot of the conversation around sustainability initiatives really were sort of put into that like marketing nice to have category. And increasingly, I think the trend that we're seeing is, you know, it's being more embedded into supply chain relationships and contracting. It's being more embedded into risk management. And I was wondering if, you know, for anyone, if you could just maybe speak a little bit to the evolution perhaps, or that you have seen kind of in this space, and how brands, whether it's, you know, for the folks who are with certain companies on the panel, or for the climate neutral folks who, you know, have worked with a wide array of brands, like how are they integrating sustainability efforts in a way beyond, you know, your traditional cause marketing effort?
Yeah, one kind of interesting thing that I've seen in quite a few of our brands is that they're tying sustainability performance. So like where you fall on different indicators, whether it's, you know, using more recycled materials or, you know, lowering your carbon emissions, is that they're tying that performance to compensation in the sense of like bonuses, and using that as a real like demand driver for managers that are managing different departments of really focusing in on achieving these goals. We're also seeing it as just part of like, you know, team performance goals of like whether or not your team was able to, you know, again, reduce your emissions or switch over. So I think tying it closely to an individual's performance will start pushing them toward thinking about this beyond just like a nice to have and as a necessity within the brands.
Yeah, and I love those examples, Caitlin. It's exciting to me to think that like the conversations are happening all the time too, like in regular reviews. And I also, Emily, you brought up the idea of risk, and I think it's especially effective when we see people set internal carbon prices, being fully aware of the fact that like that is a reality that we will all have to deal with at some point in the hopefully near future. And that is, it's a regulatory risk, it's an investment risk, but it's something that you can get ahead of, and you can use it for marketing value right now. So I think a lot of companies are beginning to just like shift the budget over and like understand that it's not a marketing expense, that it should be like built into your financial model.
I just look at it as, this America is pretty good with questioning littering. We hold each other pretty accountable for littering, just as like civilians one-on-one. If you see someone throw a Pepsi can out their window while they're driving, you're gonna be like, why'd you do that, man? Go pick that up. And we are pretty good about that, but this is just the next step of like businesses holding each other accountable for, or it's consumers holding businesses accountable for littering. So it's just the next evolution of that soda can getting thrown out onto the highway. And it's unacceptable on an individual level, and it's starting to become unacceptable on a business level.
I can't believe how quickly time is going right now. So I'm gonna kind of just like push us a little further, because I know we have a lot of great content that we want to get through. But so, we're talking specifically of sort of the snow sports industry. And I think there's a lot of conversation that we've touched on briefly here around really like the future of this industry, right? And the future of the sports that's, we all enjoy is dependent on things like snow. And we know that climate change is impacting those things. And so there's a lot of other people beyond just the makers of goods, right, in this broader industry. So maybe from y'all's experiences, you could just speak briefly about, what do you see within the outdoor industry, or maybe specifically snow sports, whether that's the resort to the maker of a good, some of the low-hanging fruit that you feel like if folks got on board, or if there was some sort of collective action, or we could pull the trigger on it and like really create measurable change in a timely fashion.
I'll just jump real quick into that. I feel like from the lowest hanging fruit, I know from our experience, was to make the decision to go carbon neutral. We will obviously, and we're working on what we need to do to better our manufacturing process and our shipping and stuff. But the fact that it was so easy to become carbon neutral, like, actually really surprised me. And I know, Austin, you and I were chatting about this briefly yesterday, about how like shockingly easy it is to actually be decent to the environment right now. And it's something that I, in the past, when I've spoken with people about options for Renoun going forward with different organizations and stuff, and it just seemed so daunting to me initially. And as it really was, I shouldn't say it's not a click a button and you're done quite, but it's far, far more simple and far more approachable than A, than I imagine it used to be, and B, than I ever would have imagined. So for us, yeah, a pretty low hanging fruit was just, having more people on board with this. I think the thing that really struck me the most, that really like kicked me over the edge, was I went to another company's website in the hardgoods space here, and their environmental page said, "Yes, we care!" exclamation point. And Caitlin, you mentioned that being like kind of broad and non-specific. I just was like, if this is what like the bar is at right now, like we need to do a little bit better than that. And if it means that I need to send a few emails and get a few things going, that's kind of, it's on me and the brand as a whole to make that, relatively tiny commitment to have a little bit of impact. And if we can start, ball rolling and get a trend going, it'd be pretty neat. And it's I'm certainly excited to see what other brands start coming on board with carbon neutral specifically, or 1%, or any other certification process out there. So I think I would just hold my hand up right away for lowest hanging fruit for us was, just sign up to go carbon neutral. And it really was amazing, really fast. And it's really, really cool. So neat.
Yeah, one of the first things that we really focused on when we were looking at manufacturing and everything was good energy, clean energy. One of the best impacts that we could really make was going solar, whether that's on our headquarters here in Vermont or our factories around the world. And good energy usage really was one of the first steps that we could jump into to really helping how we manufactured our product.
Low-hanging fruit, I'm going to go with, it's, again, not just hard goods space, but all of us collectively as humans just buying less stuff and just using your stuff until the end of its life cycle. And, Burton's tagline is Burton durable goods, built durable goods, something about durability. And even a t-shirt is very durable. I have t-shirts from my dad that are 35 years old. And equipment, hard goods are inherently very durable. They're a bunch of plastic and resin, and it's just the marketing that is not durable, that's not sustainable, that's telling you to buy new things every year. And so it's just kind of shifting the brand's role of just like how they sell stuff. And do you sell it for the season, or do you sell it until the end of its life cycle, which is like maybe 100 days? Maybe Bryan would have a better gauge on that, of what the life cycle of a pair of, a snowboard for you or skis could be. But I just don't think most people are making it to the end of its life cycle.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on how you take care of your stuff. And sometimes your best stuff is the stuff you've had for a long time and you've built these great memories with, and you just cherish it because of that. But not just durable, but designed for disassembly or designed for repairability. Burton bindings last almost infinitely. I mean, you can buy new ratchet tongues for straps or things like that on older bindings, and you see them out there for a long, long time. So that's really important.
And yeah, I'd say the binding industry is a perfect example of that, where there is no pressures to like replace your bindings every year. And people do hold on to their Burton cartels for 20 years and they keep working and they use them until they fall apart. And that mentality, I just don't think is as implemented in hard goods or in apparel or accessories, goggles, or whatever it is. It's just more of this external pressure to replace and re-up.
Yeah,
it's interesting. Like you were saying, how like throwing a Coke bottle out the window or something like that is frowned upon. Like conversely, it's been interesting how it just having the newest thing is really cool, and how we need to like work on a way to make like the older your stuff is, like the cooler it is. The more it's used, the more like life you've kind of gotten out of it. You should always be proud of having like an old pair of skis. You're like, yes, I've used these things for 120 days and I love them, kind of thing. It's kind of flipping that script. It's weird. It's kind of funny that we give credit to those who, I shouldn't say give credit to, but we hold up like the new as the best option, when maybe it is just, oh cool, man, you win, you've had 200 days on that board, that's incredible. So
there's definitely a huge role that we as consumers can play, and I think to Austin's point, not just in this industry but in everyday purchasing decisions, because it's been said many a time by people smarter than me, but we vote with our dollars every single day consistently. So how we invest those dollars really does matter. And I think the conversation around like closed loop manufacturing, which I know we don't have time to get into, but is a really fascinating space that I know all of you have sort of touched in different capacities in your industry. And we could have a whole nother panel on that, I'm sure. But knowing I want to hold some time at the end for audience questions, I'm gonna ask y'all two before I sort of go over to the chat. But the first is kind of broad, but really, knowing that I think we all, in conversations we had before this panel started, and even in the way, we all have answered different questions, is we recognize that climate change is this like existential threat, right? And sometimes it can seem so big and so overwhelming that we know, the entire sort of sustainability and environmental space struggles with this, well, what can I actually do, right? I think that's this like underlying question that individuals and brands and all of us have. And knowing that from all of you in this conversation, we've heard really tangible things that you're either doing, you're committed to doing, you're excited about, as you look to the future. So broadly speaking, when it comes to climate change and sort of the future, do you consider yourself an optimist or a pessimist, and why? And you got to answer quick.
I can start. I would say I'm a frustrated optimist in the sense that I've been frustrated with how slow action and real meaningful change has taken. But I'm optimistic in the sense of, for climate neutral, for example, we were launched 2 years ago and we're working with nearly 350 brands right now. And just kind of showing that, you know, business moves a lot faster, especially if consumers are asking it of them. You know, they listen when consumers talk. So I'm really excited by just customers kind of using their voices to push change within all different types of industries. And then the businesses for actually listening and saying, you know what, this is important. This is the right thing to do. Like, let's get started and move forward.
I'll go next. I am, well, my pessimism makes me incredibly optimistic. And I think, like, I've been obsessed with this stuff since I was like 9 years old. And the 2018 IPCC report that said that we have 12 years left to really figure this out did something in the world. Like, everyone started paying attention to this and the entire mood around it shifted. And I think that that was like a healthy dose of pessimism, to be like, no, really, we have to figure this out. And that kind of like realism has made me super optimistic, because like finally people are paying attention to it. People are leaving their jobs to work on climate. Like, we've seen this upswell that climate neutral has certainly benefited from. And that makes me really optimistic about, you know, we have all the solutions, we have the technology, like we just need the willpower, and it's starting to feel like we finally have that.
Say it's 9-year-old Isabella that gives me optimism. And I work with a couple different groups in Central Oregon. And yeah, it's all led by kids. He's like high school kids, middle school kids. And I'm like, man, when I was in high school, I did not care about this. I was not tuned into this, and just seeing how empowered the youth is on this subject and topic is obviously they're fighting for their lives. But that's where the optimism comes from. But then if you read a book, it's a David Wallace Wells book. I remember after reading that one, I was feeling very pessimistic. But so whatever the most recent literature is that you get.
I'm definitely a glasses half full kind of guy. And I think COVID's taught us two things. Is one, that we can turn it around really quick. We can come up with solutions and turn things around. And two, it's given us a chance to slow down. There's so many people that are now taking a breath, spending time outside, growing their own food, things like that. I think when people do that, they're going to appreciate what we have and they're going to try to make it better. So I'm an optimist.
I would echo that for sure. Definitely optimism behind it. Yeah, Bryan, I think it has been amazing to see how fast people are able to shift, and how much as COVID starts to slow down a little bit and life goes back to whatever normal looks like, and how I've heard so many times where people are like, well, maybe we don't need to go back to that. We can keep this new track that we have, and so it is really exciting to see how natural like the new becomes. And I think in the car industry and Tesla just being a leader in the acceleration of electrification. And it's funny how all these huge manufacturers who used to basically be poo-pooing electricity in cars are now getting fully on board with that. And for these massive brands to make the switch in a relatively, for them, a short period of time, yeah, it is really exciting to see. And especially, Caitlin and Isabella, when we were first talking here, there's that, you're saying we're at that tipping point for you guys in particular, but I think as overall, but yeah, we're in this really, really exciting time where we all get to watch this pendulum like swing back, I think, the other way, or swing in a different direction at the very least. So I'm excited for it.
Well, it's good to know. I mean, I guess I sort of made the assumption, right, that we all have a level of optimism, or we wouldn't be here kind of doing this work and in this space. But I always find that really fascinating to hear people's like interpretation of something that is so big and so dire in so many ways, and yet really actionable in so many other ways. So I'm going to take some questions from the chat, and I'll just kind of throw this out there. Feel free, like one or two of you maybe can answer each one. But when you think about the future of hard goods, what are you sort of excited and or inspired by?
jump in on this one. There's two things. I think one is the notion of the quiver killer. You know, the piece of gear that you have that can do a lot of things really well. And then the other idea is customizable product. So if the customer has interaction with it, you know, if they can, whether it's pick out their colors, their graphics or features or something, then they tend to, for lack of a better word, own it more. They're buying into it mentally as well as physically. And so then I think when you have that, then you want to hold on to that piece of gear, that piece of equipment. You want to take it, you want to take care of it, you want to use it, you want to have fun with it. Again, touching on that building memories part, it becomes part of you. So you love it, so you hold on to it longer. I think it's a pretty neat way of looking at product.
I think you love it and you hold on to it longer the more you fix stuff too. And just like getting that into more part of our culture is repairing stuff and fixing stuff. Like we do a really good job with our homes. Like Americans really take pride and ownership of their homes, and they paint them and they fix the siding and they do all these things. And if we could get that mentality into consumer goods, it really extend the life cycle of them all.
They're held up as an example all of the time, but like Patagonia with their Worn Wear initiative, right? I mean, there's so many ways that you could take what is fundamentally a relatively simple model and apply that in a lot of different industries. And they've done, I think, a great job of, you know, that little patch that says Worn Wear on your jacket is almost like this icon of pride. And it's something people like seek out as opposed to, oh, I have a big hole on my jacket, right? So how that can like extend into other industries conceptually, I think is a really exciting thing to think about. And then, you know, what if people wanted to learn more, and I'll let y'all interpret this as, you know, tied to the hard good industry or your industry specifically, or broadly sustainability. And I'd love if each of you could just answer this briefly, but what's like one resource that you would recommend to people to go learn more information about this topic or sustainability or what have you?
I'll start this off if you guys want. Yeah, I would call up that friend who you think is just like definitely eco friend in your group kind of thing, and just ask them questions. Yeah, I think Vermont, we have plenty of them obviously, but I've always been fascinated when I actually start having those conversations with like my friends around that, and how eye-opening it is, especially since it's a very safe space, right? You know, they're not going to judge you on it and whatnot. So yeah, I would call your friend who you've always considered to be somebody who's a little more like conscientious about the earth.
Yeah, one thing, this is probably like not the most educational option, but if you watch the Netflix documentary series, Our Planet, I live and breathe this every day, but that one still got me. It's David Attenborough. And I think it just does a really good job of making that connection between a changing climate and how it impacts and threatens the places and the animals that we love. And just those really striking visuals helps you kind of retain the information. Again, it's not the super, like a really deep dive, but I think it'll kind of get you, if you're feeling down about it, it'll get you really motivated to get involved and kind of take the next step toward action.
Yeah, well, so part of my job is to like look at people's brand level carbon footprints all day, every day. And so I've learned just so much about the carbon that's embedded in the products all around us. And Climate Neutral has its own like piece of software that we use to measure carbon footprints for Renoun and Season Equipped. And that's been like, that's radically changed the way that climate change, because the trade-offs that you think are good trade-offs aren't always the trade-offs that you like want them to be. And so I think like being super data driven as we make our individual choices and think about like how an ideal world works, like it's good to understand how carbon gets into objects. And the New York Times has a really fun kind of like Quizlet type of thing that's like, would you choose, you know, hamburgers or no flights, or it's a good way to like test your own knowledge on like these trade-offs. And I look at carbon footprints all day and I did horribly. And I think like it's just important for us all to realize that, you know, we know so little about the actual like carbon all around us, and that needs to improve. And you can also look at the brand profile pages on our website, and all of our certified brands have their footprints publicized. So that's just a shameless plug, but starting to understand the carbon that's around us and things.
Bella, not to put you on the spot, but if you have a second to drop that link in the chat,
Sure.
you can find it. I think people would love that. Thanks. What about you, Austin?
Was I called on? I guess, yeah, my biggest learning opportunity, and I think it's available for everyone, is just getting involved with POW, Protect Our Winters. They've been super helpful for me of just kind of learning the different scope of climate change and the approach through legislation. And I don't know, they're a very welcoming organization, whether you want to be a volunteer, whether you just want to learn some stuff. They're super helpful, very kind people. So that'd be my recommendation.
For me, I think the one big thing is trying to learn more about water. Water is such a huge, valuable resource, and there's so many different ways that it affects us. Whether it's in manufacturing product, we use tons of water, and we actually do really bad things to the water, or the way we personally intake water, use water in our daily lives. It's something that we all really need to pay attention to.
Thanks so much. And I would just offer, I don't know if folks out there are familiar with Project Drawdown, but that is my advice to everyone that I meet that wants to learn more about this, is just, it's economists and environmental scientists got together and identified essentially 100 solutions that already exist that could help us achieve our climate results. And they kind of dive in and make the case for them at scale. And so it's a good place to start, particularly if you want to believe in an optimistic future, I think. Well, we're at time. I know there were so many more questions in the chat. I'm so sorry for the folks who put them out there that we weren't able to get to them all, but thanks for everyone's engagement. And thanks so much for all of our panelists for the really great discussion and your time and energy. And, you know, I really hope you all keep up the great work, and I hope inspired a lot of others. And, you know, we need more people like yourselves in this work and in this movement, whether that's as individuals making daily choices or leading companies and mobilizing industries. So really excited to see what y'all all do in the future. And thanks so much for everyone's time.
Thanks, everybody.
The awkward Zoom sign off.
Who's going to do it first? Right. Awesome. No, but really, I had a fun time, guys. I think it's really, really neat to hear everybody's perspective, and I love the fact that we had such a broad, Bryan, with your years of experience at Burton, and Austin, as a pro and coming into, in your case, a brand new company now, but bringing that experience from from your past into it is really, really neat. And Caitlin and Isabella, obviously, climate neutral and everything that you guys have helped us through. It's fun to hear your perspective too, because I think it really is like, we're all individuals, like Emily said, or individual companies, but it really is. It's not gonna be solved by any single person, but it's neat that you guys are helping facilitate, bring more people together, or brands together. So thank you for taking the time. This has been really fun.
Yeah, thanks for bringing us into it, Cyrus. It was really good. And there's so many things you could talk about, like we could go super deep on 100 things and still not really even get a point across.
Yeah. No, I mean, you touched on just building product that can be disassembled, right? And I feel like that's a whole, couple beers in a bar somewhere and talk through that as well. And Austin, like with Season and the love that what you guys are doing with just having, from the get-go, everything you build is designed and marketed, which I think is, back to what Isabella originally said around like the long-term play. So cool. It's so cool. And it's been fun to watch everything you guys were doing in the past, even though you've only been on the market for, it feels like a while, but a few months now. It's really neat.
Austin, I'm guessing that you're familiar with closed loop partners. Okay, cool. Anyways, thanks y'all. It was really fun. And I've been kind of working in the healthcare space since October through all this COVID stuff. So I haven't had a lot of these conversations in a long time. It's still like, outside of just like my personal relationship. So this was really like re-inspiring for me too. So thank you all.